Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Well, beyond the fence. I'm gonna take a freight train down at the station, Lord. I don't care where it goes. I'm gonna climb a mountain, the highest mountain. I'll jump off, nobody gonna know. The Marshall Tucker Band. I'm so angry. I did my best. I really did. That road from the army base where we live now, running out west towards that looted Costo outlet near Corvallis, is littered with abandoned cars and trucks, all rusting out, tires flat, gas tank lids and caps open. I know all the places where you have to go off-road to get around them, but there are always things you just can't predict. The law of unintended consequences, they call it. That's what happened to me, I guess. I became an unintended consequence. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. I'm not thinking very clearly right now. Molly, too, my Staffordshire Terrier. She was an unintended consequence as well, maybe. I guess. I felt worse about her in the end, honestly. I loved Molly so much. Those little fuckers. I hate them so much. And now I am them. The old Toyota 4Runner was running pretty smooth despite the degraded quality of the fuel that was left to us, and it only bogged down on me a few times during the drive, but never stalled out. When I reached the parking lot, I came to a stop by the loading docks, like always. I grabbed the cut-down Remington 12-gauge and stuffed the box of pumpkin balls into my jacket pocket. Normally, I would have left the driver's side door open, but I had to keep Molly inside. I certainly wasn't bringing her in there. The rear door to the Costco was still propped open, just like it always is, and I found the battered old orange hand truck sitting right there in the corner, just like it always is. Things looked much as they always did. I couldn't hear anything, but I still kept the shotgun pointed directly ahead of me as I entered the store floor from the back room. I clicked on the small flashlight mounted to the barrel with some electrical tape and squinted into the darkness. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I entered. I left the hand truck right there and proceeded very slowly. It was my turn to do this today, and I never argued against it when my turn came. But Kaylee was my only remaining child, and I had to get back to her. I was in no big rush. I simply had to do my job and get back. I'm just so angry now. I really messed this up. I took a can of baked beans off the closest shelf and threw it as far as I could down one of the aisles, and then I shuffled back a few steps to see what would happen, listening for the sound of footsteps, ready to run if there were too many. I heard nothing. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I moved forward. A short time later, I had the first load of supplies stacked up on the hand truck. I left it there and checked the back room again with the flashlight beam on my shotgun, and then checked the back parking lot for a moment just to make sure everything was cool out there too. Seeing nothing of concern, I hauled the first load of supplies out and loaded them into the back of the 4Runner as quietly as possible. When I returned, I took all of the same precautions, I made no assumptions. But again, everything seemed clear, so I went ahead and gathered up the rest of the supplies. In the end, I had canned foods, batteries, bottled water and juice, toilet paper, napkins, Tylenol, garbage bags, t-shirts, vitamins, and a few other things. There wasn't very much left at that Costco by that point, but we didn't go much further into the more previously populated urban areas until it became truly necessary. Again, I checked the back room and the parking lot before I hauled the hand truck out through the loading dock door and placed everything in the back of the old Toyota SUV as quietly as possible. Then I heard the sound of something being knocked over, coming through the rear door of the Costco outlet. It sounded metallic, maybe a bucket or a garbage pail being tipped over, or something like that. I pointed my shotgun in that direction for a second, and then jumped into the driver's seat of the Toyota and drove off. I had what I came for, and Molly was barking like crazy. It would take at least 5 or 6 hours, maybe more, to get back to the base, and I had already traveled at least that same amount of time, just getting there earlier that day. I would definitely have to refuel from the tanks in the back soon. I was ready to push on through, but when it started raining, I knew it would take much longer, and it would be much more dangerous. I had to rethink my plans. I knew a place. It was more important that I just got back to Kaylee than getting back right away. I knew she would be scared if I didn't return that night, but that's obviously better than not returning at all. My sister Amy would comfort her as much as possible. I wasn't looking forward to my night either, but Amy would take care of her until I got there with the supplies. Like I said, I knew a place. It was just past a highway exit sign for Langhorne Avenue. That sign has a red letter X spray painted across it. Everyone knows what that means. Just past that exit, along the side of the road just before you reach Redmond, there is a little sleep spot we sometimes use when we have to. It has proven safe. It used to be a small electrical substation, just a little 8x12 steel structure, about 10 feet tall, that once housed some power transmission equipment. At some point, someone gutted it out, and you can still see the old components rusting there, just outside of the door, the tall grass growing up through the cracks. I pulled the Toyota around in front of that old substation, but I kept the engine running, and I stayed inside for a little while and used my binoculars to search the surrounding area for signs of movement. The sky was gray and the sun was setting, but I saw nothing of concern. So eventually I grabbed the shotgun and my travel bag and got out of the SUV as cautiously and quietly as possible. I left the driver's side door open, despite the light rain. I didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and if I needed to make a quick escape, that could make the difference. Once Molly and I were inside that old substation, I quickly closed the door behind me and dropped the zip-tie bundled rebar bolts into place. Then I stood there by the door for a while, holding my shotgun, but I didn't hear anything outside, and eventually I relaxed a bit. They don't like the rain, but you never really know. The filthy old mattress was a welcome sight. I sat there as I ate a cold can of Chef Boyardee raviolis. They were so delicious, and I took my time. It was a treat. I had dog food and water for Molly, too. She was happy as well. Afterwards, I laid my sleeping bag out on the mattress, and Molly and I fell asleep to the fading sound of rain pattering off the steel roof. It was nice. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of Molly's growling and barking. She was standing by the door, and I could hear the sounds of screaming and scratching coming from the other side. I grabbed my shotgun and pulled Molly back, breathing heavily, hoping the door would hold. I checked the rebar bolts. The door seemed solid. After a while, the rain picked up. The violent sounds coming from outside faded away, and then I set the shotgun down and returned to the bed. It was hard to find sleep again. I stared up into the darkness for a while. It was just over 3 years ago when it all began. A facility in the woods of northern Montana where they housed and performed tests on children who had been exposed to experimental biochemical weapons in various locations around the world. Things were fine there until they were not. The confused and sometimes conflicting news reports at the time mostly said that there was an antivirus that was administered to those kids on a daily basis. But one day the supplies ran out. Then, by the next morning, that facility was overrun. Blood and gore. The fences went down. But what no one knew until then was that it was contagious. Most people past the age of adolescence quickly succumb to it, but not everyone. No one really knows why. It all happened very quickly, and then it was all over, and I mean all of it. Everything. The world is very different now. This part of the world, anyway. I really don't know what it's like elsewhere. We don't receive news reports anymore. I eventually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later with Molly cuddled up by my side. I fed her some kibble for breakfast, and then I ate a granola bar and drank a bottle of water and packed up my gear. I looked out through the 2 small peepholes before leaving the safety of the substation with Molly by my side. The rain had stopped, but it was still gray and cloudy. I guess I made a little too much noise unbolting and opening the door. As soon as we stepped outside, I heard the clattering from behind the substation and on the low rooftop overhead. They must have just waited out there all night. I didn't know they were capable of that. I thought they just retreated back into the woods once they quit the hunt. Molly paid the price, not me. I hate myself for that. I hate myself. When they pounced, I fired my shotgun twice and blasted 2 of them in the chest and put them down. Both teenage boys, stark naked and filthy, with elongated nails and teeth, long straggly hair, moving with predatory speed. Unfortunately, there were 3 more who fell on Molly, 2 adults and a kid. I was about to take another shot, but they were all over her. And trust me, she was fighting back like a fucking monster. But I just saw no way to not hit her as well. After a few seconds, I realized she would soon be dead anyway, so I just unloaded my remaining 4 shells and killed them all, including Molly. I was so angry, but I started crying right away. I'm still enraged. They made me kill Molly, those little fuckers. As I was making my way to the driver's side door of the Toyota with my head down and staring at the grass through my tear-blurred vision, that's when the last one got me. He was just a little kid, maybe 10 years old. Perhaps that's why he held back when the others rushed in. I don't know. Who can say? Who knows how they think? I guess I will know soon enough. It's already starting. He came around from the back of the lift gate and dove at me and bit me on my forearm. There was only the one quick bite before I turned around and smashed him in the forehead with the butt of my Remington. But as soon as I got into the forerunner and closed the door, I could see that he had drawn blood. I wiped it off with my bandana and poured some rubbing alcohol on it. I was scared, but I still had some hope. I had my fingers crossed, but I still had some hope. That hope faded quickly along the drive back to the base. I feel sick now. I feel very sick, and it's just getting worse. My head is starting to pound, and I feel like I might need to vomit. My teeth and gums and my fingernails and toenails are all starting to ache. My vision is changing, and my throat is dry. I'm starting to make some involuntary growling sounds, and I cannot stop gripping the steering wheel with all of the strength in my hands. I want to just get out of the Toyota and run. It doesn't even matter where. I was planning to just drop off these supplies by the front gates of the base and then leave. but it's still at least a 2-hour drive, and I am afraid of who or what I will be by the time I get there. I think I have to just turn around right now and drive in the opposite direction for as long as I possibly can. I have reloaded the Remington, and I am keeping it handy. I am sweating and drooling pretty hard now. I can't help it. My clothes are also starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I think I might need to pull over and remove my shirt and boots soon. Maybe my jeans too. I don't think I can take this too much longer. I keep looking at the woods along the side of the road. I just want to run off into the trees. I want to scream. I want to eat something while it is still breathing. Mostly, I just want to end this before it gets worse. I know that I will never see Kaylee again, and even more than what happened to Molly, that's what makes me feel so sick. I'm sure my sister Amy will take good care of her, but still, I just feel so sick. I keep looking at the woods and at the Remington. I just have to keep driving for a little bit longer now. The radio stations all went dark years ago, and there's only one stupid old CD stuck inside the dashboard stereo in this Toyota for me to listen to as I drive, the Marshall Tucker Band. So I turn it up. What else am I going to do? The hum of the motor is hurting my head, and the lyrics seem right. I'm gonna find me a hole in the wall. I'm gonna crawl inside and die. But no, I don't think so. That would be too easy. I think I'm gonna die with my boots on, and I'm definitely gonna bring some of you little bastards with me. Get ready to eat some of these 12-gauge pumpkin balls. It's not going to be pretty. I'm gonna cut some of you little demons in half while I still can. As many of you as possible until my ammo runs out. I owe that much to Kaylee and Molly and Amy and all of the others. I see a red letter X spray painted on the exit sign up ahead. I'll be there soon. You'll know when I arrive, you little fuckers. Trust me, you'll know. Frayed Edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood, or more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath, studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn. The light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. "What is wrong with me?" he wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. "Why am I so on edge?" Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes. Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blessed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. Is somebody there? He saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. No, 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 no! He panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again, then bang, and his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No, I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail, like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters, painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo! He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear and worry and sorrow, grief and loneliness and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left. Anger. Coming, he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe, an emerald deal. This is unbelievable, Francis exclaimed as he held my self-portrait in his hands. It looks just like you. Francis Frankie Cullens is my best friend, and he holds in his hands what I hoped to be the beginning of my illustrious career as an artist. I smile at him, a humble, gentle smile, as I contain the bubbling anxiety within the pit of my stomach. Do you really think so? I asked, in what I hoped to be a tone that indicated only mild curiosity, and not that of a child seeking validation. Frankie looked from the painting and up to me with blazed excitement in his eyes. This is no joke, Mort. What I have in my hands here is pure, uncut talent. He lightly shook the painting in his hands as he said so, but abruptly stopped when he realized he was doing so, as if worrying he could ruin it. As a matter of fact, Frankie continued, I'd like to post this on your page and talk about the process of how you painted this, if you're all right with that. Honestly, I was taken aback by this offer. What, like, you want to be my manager or something? I sarcastically asked him this as I chuckled, but Frankie's face remained sincere. His response to me felt so genuine, so lacking in the raillery I expected, that it took me some time to register it. Why not? I've always believed in your work, Mort, even when no one else did. But with this, he trailed off as he looked back down at my painting. Finally, he continued. This was seriously all freehand? I nodded. Yes, it really was. But, Frankie, would you really want to be my manager? I don't even know what that job would involve. He waved his hand dismissively at me and smirked. Exactly why you need one. Let me handle all the details. But this, you just need to worry about making more of this. His smirk had grown into a wide grin as his eyes welled with moisturized droplets. I was stupefied at my friend's eagerness to want to work for me after seeing this latest piece of my work. I knew, of course, that this painting and all others that followed would be different. But to have this sort of hypnotic effect was entirely unexpected. Yeah, okay, I hesitantly agreed. Go ahead and post it, then. Frankie's eyes widened in a somewhat disturbing display of ecstasy. Perfect. I'll get on that right now, and you do what you gotta do for your process, and you get another painting out. ASAP. I promise you, Mort, this is going to be huge. Before I could even open my mouth to respond, Frankie had already darted out of my studio, which was just my room in our shared apartment, and into his room across the hall as I heard his door slam behind him in an eager swing. I stood silently amidst the canvases on easels, which all displayed different degrees of blankness to what had the appearance of being worked on for several minutes of brush strokes. Then, forgotten, they stood around the room in a way that formed a labyrinth to the bed, one which only I knew the right way through. I looked at all of these unfinished and unbegun paintings and vowed they would not stay this way for long. Things were different now. I got most of the way through a new painting I was working on. I believe I will title Green Singers, when I noticed I was at it for almost 10 hours straight. No food, water, or bathroom breaks. I got myself into bed. I lay there for an unknowable amount of time as sleep eluded me, and I found myself thinking back to a conversation I'd had with an alluring stranger. It was last week, on a Thursday, when I was at my favorite art exhibition in town, which thankfully had a small coffee shop near the entrance. As I sipped at my caramel macchiato, I was scrolling through the reactions, or lack thereof, one of my paintings received. It had been posted for approximately 72 hours and had garnered 7 likes, while most of the comments were uninspired at best and rude at worst. One of them even said something along the lines of, "This is motel art at best. You look too scared to put any real expression into your work. Don't quit your day job for this. Hope this helps." What the hell was that even supposed to mean? I dropped my phone on the table in such a frustrated way that my coffee trembled and nearly spilled. Not that I cared. I threw my hands over my face and exhaled in an admittedly overdramatic, defeated way. There I buried my face as I gathered myself when I heard someone sit down in the chair across from me. I looked up, expecting to see Frankie. Instead, it was a man who I had never seen before. I recall little from his physical appearance, but I remember he was wearing an expensive-looking suit, and his eyes, those piercing emerald green eyes with an intense and age sheen, the likes of which I had never seen before. "Can I help you?" I asked, making sure the irritated tone, hinting at "please go away," was noticeable in my inflection. The stranger gave me a smile that was warm and comforting, and I felt my disappointment in myself and the world melt away from my chest. I know it's weird to say, but I instantly felt comfortable with this man here. "I'm a fan of your work," he said to me. His voice was velvety and sweet. "I wanted to meet you in person, but I have to say, there is room for improvement." Of course, I thought to myself, another critic who thinks they can tell me how to paint. "Oh yeah?" I said, with the irritation back in force. I took another sip from my coffee. "Oh, yes," the man said. "But that's not a bad thing. Every great artist knows there is always room for improvement. It's the knowledge that one would never achieve perfection, yet their pursuit for it is endless. I rolled my eyes at him, though I guessed he did have a point. Maybe you're right, and I'm guessing you have the solution for that? This was obviously a rhetorical question, yet the man kept his gaze locked in mine, and he said, "It so happens I do." What would you say if your paintings would become the epitome of perfection? That through your great works, your name would be immortalized, etched into the framework of history alongside Monet, Van Gogh, Michelangelo, and so many others. I laughed dryly at him. For that, I paused, peering searchingly into my cup of coffee, now at room temperature. For that, I would give everything. That statement came out of me so much more sincerely than I would have expected from myself. Realizing this, I laughed at myself, raised my coffee, and gulped the rest of it down. I was feeling this odd sense of anticipation I could not explain. Like the feeling a kid at a theme park gets when they are near the end of the line for a ride on one of the attractions. The man with the green eyes raised an eyebrow at me as he said, "While I admire the enthusiasm, I wouldn't ask you for everything. If I were to perfect your art, I would ask for very little in return. In fact, now it was my turn to raise my eyebrows, but in a more incredulous, disbelieving sort of way. Wait, are you serious right now?" The man said nothing. He only kept that cool, soothing smile. I pressed on. "So, you could make me one of the greatest artists of all time, and you would want what? My soul? That's what this is, right? Some low-budget Twilight Zone episode where you grant me my biggest dream, and all I give in return is my soul?" Now the man leaned forward in his chair, closer to me. I could smell him now. It was a scent that felt so refreshing, as it ignited nostalgic feelings for events of my life that I could not recall ever happening. It soon dawned on me that the feelings of nostalgia his scent gave me were not like smelling freshly mowed grass and remembering a magical summer from childhood. This was a sense of longing for events in my life I had not yet lived. "No, you don't have to worry about that," he said in a reserved timbre. "Despite what certain media would tell you, I don't barter for souls." I considered this, then asked him, "Well, then what do you want from me?" "Two things," he said. "If I immortalize you and your art, I need you to paint something for me. I will tell you what at a time of my choosing. Second, I need you, Jack Mortimer, to say 5 little words to me to endorse our contract." I was practically vibrating in my seat now, with anticipation, as if a colony of butterflies had birthed within me all at once. He didn't need to tell me what those 5 words were that he needed, as I could feel them on the tip of my tongue, ready to burst. I stood up and eagerly reached my hand out to shake his. He did the same. I fervently told him what he needed to hear. "I see you, Mr. Green. Check out." 3 months had passed since I painted that self-portrait, which I allowed Frankie to keep. He keeps it proudly hung in his new office, where he works around the clock to get me new exhibits for my paintings. Green Singers had been a phenomenal success, and there had been 12 others so far after. He even got me a spot to talk on the late night show, which, to be fair, didn't seem too hard, as they had reached out to him and practically begged for me to make an appearance. But what I found most astonishing from this whole experience was that the scenes I painted seemed to come to life not long after they were finished. When I painted my hometown with a clearly visible view of the Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky, the next evening, the miraculous anomaly was reported across the states, which led astronomers stumped as to how it had suddenly become so bright to make it so visible to the naked eye. I painted snow in Southern California, and the next day there was a blanket of almost 12 inches in Los Angeles. That's what made it exceptionally convenient when, out of the millions of supporters and admirers across the globe, I discovered one truly bitter, ignorant critic. His name was Elijah Quill, better known by his Reddit username as ELQ69. A truly tasteless name to choose for one such as him. It didn't take long for me to find a picture of him, as people like him are always so self-absorbed that their photos are aplenty and public to pair with their highly opinionated views. But Eli should have thought to be more careful what he does with photos of himself on the internet. After I had memorized his face, his body type, and what style he wears, it was almost too easy to paint his liking as I saw fit. Elijah Quill, in my depiction, was seen in a dark alley somewhere, having been beaten to death. The folds inside his pocket turned out to indicate he had been robbed after the fact. I kept this painting to myself, of course, but couldn't resist the urge to Google the news in the city I found that he lived in. There he was, the egotistical bastard, making the top headline. Good for him. A few days after the oh-so-tragic passing of LQ69, Frankie came to see me. We no longer lived in that small apartment together, as I had found a nice condo in the city. I buzzed him in, and he came in with that adoring, eager grin. That suck-up smile was starting to get on my nerves. "Hey, Mort," he said cheerfully. My God, he's practically skipping towards me, I thought exasperatedly. "Listen, I got a new opening for you downtown, and if you're okay with it, I'm thinking somewhere around 5 we can..." I held a hand to stop him, which he did instantly. Hang on a second, Frankie. There's something I got to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He cocked his head to the side as he asked me, "Sure, what's up?" I looked him into those weirdly adoring eyes as he waited. "I'm going to have to let you go, Frankie." The look Frankie gave me was as if I had just kicked a puppy across the room. "What?" he stammered. I blinked and said, "You're fired, Frankie. I'm sorry, but the truth is, I don't need you anymore. You can expect your last check in the mail." Frankie backed away, his legs trembling. His eyes darted about the room in disbelief. "I can't believe this. I thought we was friends, Mort." Tears had already begun to roll down his face. "We were, but let's face it, Frankie, I've outgrown you. I'm sure you understand." Frankie's face turned beet red as he exclaimed, "You can't do this. We were a team." I watched him begin to storm away and back to my front door as he yelled over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Mort. It was both of us. Together." The door slammed. "Well, that was dramatic," I said to no one. Ciao. That night, I awoke with a start. I was having some horrendous dreams, though I can't remember the details. Now awake, I found that I was standing in my new studio, painting. The unfinished work before me showed horrid images that were difficult for the human mind to comprehend. Hulking beasts of otherworldly proportions as they crowded and swarmed an unnamed city. People stacked haphazardly on pyres as they burned in a green, hellish inferno. The more I looked into this accursed piece, the more I felt my sanity quickly escaping me. I thought I heard voices chanting around me in some long-forgotten tongue, whispering names I had not heard nor possessed the power to pronounce. Summoning every ounce of my mental fortitude and strength, I managed to tear my gaze from the canvas as I knocked it to the floor. That's when I saw. Behind it was another easel, and displayed on it was my painting of the murdered Elijah Quill, whose disproportionately crooked neck had upturned his face to look directly into my eyes. That one should not be there, I thought incredulously. It was hidden away. Come now, Mr. Mortimer. Such a beauty should never be kept hidden. That voice behind me. It was his voice. I spun around and saw the man, this Mr. Green, smiling at me. "You," I said, as I pointed an accusing finger at him. "You're what made me paint that nightmare, aren't you?" Mr. Green looked at the unfinished painting on the floor, then back to me. "That was our deal, Mort. One painting of my choosing, when I wish it. It would be in your best interest to uphold your end and finish it." "No," I muttered. No, I will not bring that hell into being. The deal is off. You can take away this power. I've already gotten enough out of it anyway. Mr. Green sighed at me, but coolly said, I would have to agree. Thanks to your admirable work with Mr. Quill, I was taken aback by this. What do you mean by that? I demanded. Mr. Green's smile vanished. He sneered at me as he explained. I told you when we first met that I do not barter for souls. I don't have to, as your kind are always so eager to place it in the palm of my hand. For just the smallest taste of power and ultimate adoration, you burned yourself on the very pyre that you built. My jaw dropped open. No. But what could I say? What could I do? I go now, Mr. Green continued with a returning smile, now sinister as a dealer in a rigged game of poker, to prepare a place for you. And with those parting words, he faded from view, until all that was left were two floating orbs of emerald glaring at me, until they, too, were gone, alone again. In the darkness of my condo, I began to see visions, things that were not of my home, of a similar layout to the one I used to live in the apartment with Frankie. On a table, I saw a mostly empty bottle of Jack Daniels. I turned and saw on the edge of the bed was Frankie. He still lived in that tiny apartment, and here he was, drunk beyond all reason, with tears flooding his face and snot oozing from a sniffling nose. I saw in his hands he held that self-portrait, the first of my paintings after that deal. Damn you, Mort, he whimpered. He produced a pocket lighter and set the flame to the bottom corner of my self-portrait. No, Frankie, wait! I screamed at him, but he didn't appear to hear me. The flames ate up the canvas as they crept from the torso to the painted face. Damn you to hell, Mort, Frankie began to sob. The images of Frankie's room vanished, and my own dwellings had returned. This is unbelievable, I cried as the last image of Frankie disappeared, standing here in the dark of my own vanity. I felt the effects of Frankie's actions with that damned painting. The fire started at my feet and quickly licked and raced up my legs, soon engulfing my body. I yelled, swatting at the flames, yet the inferno continued to spread all around me, and only me as I raised my hands to my face and screamed, "These blades are made for Woundin." The knife whispered to him in its innocent, mouse-like voice, "Tatum." Blythe gritted his teeth and squeezed the blade's handle in a white-knuckle grip. Moisture threatened to spill over from his eyes. "No," he said, "not now, not tonight. Stop it. But the knife, as usual, paid him no mind. Half hidden in the reflection along the blade, the little face grinned. It giggled. Its high-pitched tones recalled the voices of untold Disney characters. Murder, Tatum, murder, killing, death, slayings, stabby, stabby, stab, stab. Tears spilling from his eyes, he began to chop the onion like a madman. Meanwhile, the blade giggled and chattered about everything it could do. Stabbing and slicing Tatum, punctured lungs, impaled hearts, slashed open bellies, sweet, juicy, beautiful blood, Tatum. Like a fountain, Tatum. Like a goddamn fountain. Tatum chopped, diced, and sliced the onion into oblivion. The recipe had asked for onion cut into cubes, and he had gone overboard. Behind Tatum, the toilet flushed. The sounds of hand washing came, and then the bathroom lock clicked open. Luella Fairchild, indeed as fair as her family name declared, stepped out. "How's the meal prep going?" she asked. He chucked the knife into the sink with a metallic clang. He grabbed a different blade from the magnetic knife rack. "Great," he said, his voice cracking. "Oh, let me handle that," Lou said. Before he could stop her, she'd picked up the knife and turned the tap on. What could he say? "Don't touch that. The blade is sentient and maniacal." He'd be the one who sounded insane. She'd leave and never look back. Hell, she'd tell her friends to steer clear of him, and they'd inform their friends. He'd be alone forever. So, he watched her with the knife. He waited for a tiny voice to delight in obscenities. Luella pre-washed the knife under the tap. With the sponge, she wiped the blade clean until it glinted. And then, she placed the knife into the dishwasher. Meanwhile, the knife said nothing. She caught his gaze as she bent down to the dishwasher. A small smile touched the corner of her lips, but there was a flash of confusion, like light on a blade, in her eyes. "What?" he laughed. The sound was wild and unhinged. "Nothing. Hey, would you pass me the wine? I want to caramelize these onions. It's on the dining room table." The caution in her face softened, and her smile became more relaxed. "Sure thing. You sure do know your way around a kitchen, Tatum. I can't wait to try it. Be right back." He sighed and scrolled on his phone through the rest of the recipe. His battery was running low, so he plugged it into the charger cable he always kept on the counter. "So, the next step is to..." Half a second after Lou had left the room, the fresh knife in his hands chuckled. "Murder, Tatum. Beautiful, cold-blooded murder. Stab her in the back, Tatum, in the back. Get her in the kidneys and watch her bleed out. Gorgeous killings, Tatum. Slash, stab, and slice. No, not this one, too." Could it be that it wasn't the knives at all? That it was him? That he was the one who was insane? Tatum took the knife and threw it at the wall. He screamed, not thinking about his present company.
No!
The blade thudded into the wall with the accuracy of a circus knife thrower. It punctured the wall, pointy end first, and remained there, wobbling from the force. Behind him, Luella screamed and jumped, dropping the wine. The bottle hit the kitchen tiles and shattered. Glass fragments and splashes of wasted wine flew in all directions. That was that then. The gig was up. Lou knew he was nuts. Tatum turned to look at her. He stood there, panting, eyes wide, hair wild, madness written all over his face. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Lou. I'm so sorry. You need to leave. Hands held to her collarbone. Lou stepped around the glass and approached him. She reached for him, shaking. Will you please tell me what's going on, Tatum? Her voice hitched. I can help. You need to trust me and open up. It's not good to keep this sort of thing trapped deep inside. He stammered. I can't. Tatum, leave. Go on. Get out. Go. Now! A heartbeat passed between them. Lou's eyes couldn't grow any wider. The world held its breath. The knives said nothing. And then the woman burst into tears and bolted from his apartment. Tatum sobbed. What was wrong with him? Had he lost it? Were the men in white coats coming to take him away? Coming to take him away? Tatum slammed the door shut. He took a step, tripped over the open dishwasher, and fell backwards. He landed on the knife Luella had cleaned and placed upright. The blade sliced through his back and penetrated out through his chest in a gout of blood. The wet metal glinted. Yay! Murder! Squeaked a tiny voice. Tatum gasped as the cold hands of death squeezed his heart. He reached up for his phone on the counter. His fingers crawled like a blind spider until Tatum found it. Lou! He choked, blood dribbling from his mouth. Lou? The charger cable, still plugged in, caught around something and yanked. The knife rack toppled from the kitchen counter, spilling the knives into the air. The glinting blades twirled and plunged like Olympic divers going for gold. They punctured him and left him pin-cushioned. A choir of voices rose in ecstasy. Yay! He should have told Luella what was going on. He'd been too scared to speak about this madness, fearing it would drive her away. But he'd driven her away anyway, and it had resulted in his death. He shouldn't have kept it all bottled inside. Now it was too late. Tears trickled from his eyes and intermingled with the blood spilling from his mouth as he faded away. The knives wriggled inside him, giggling about death and murder. Silence of the full moon. Life is full of stressors. Monotonous jobs whose days make the worker feel as if trapped in a singular moment in time. Bills that reach up to your neck. And of course, course, the noise. When the noise can get so loud and so invasive, it feels as if ants are crawling over the surface of your brain. That is what Sarah felt. She had moved to the big city just over 3 months ago with the promise of a new job. But lately, she felt that it was all becoming too much for her, and she decided to use her accrued days off and try out a silent retreat that had been advertised around town. She had looked into this place, and she thought it sounded exotic. This retreat was apparently an old mansion that was once occupied by a wealthy family up until the 90s. Not long after the passing of the husband and wife who lived there, their son, named Dorian Crowley, inherited the massive house and, instead of living in it, had turned it into a silent retreat for anyone looking for such a luxury. Sarah couldn't find much information on this latest owner of the mansion, other than he seemed to live a reclusive life and had a mindset of what most would call a progressive, vegan diet, spiritual health, inner peace, and the works. At least that's how she grasped it. Sarah wasn't too big on that herself, but didn't fault anyone for that lifestyle. Besides, she was currently looking for that exact lifestyle for her getaway weekend. So maybe the owner of this retreat might be on to something. Sarah arrived at this rustic manor early in the morning on a Saturday, and she was struck breathless. The manor was Victorian style, with what looked like several rooms, almost each with its own balcony for the tenant to step out and enjoy the fresh air, which was aplenty, as the building itself was surrounded by a thick and vibrant forest. Sarah couldn't see the slightest sign of civilization peeking through these dense trees as they seemingly engulfed the property. There was an eerie quiet surrounding the place, but Sarah had to remind herself that this was to be expected as of the nature of this excursion. She realized that though she'd grown to hate the constant noise and hustle of city life, she had also grown used to it, and would have to get over this irrational sense of unease in this place of silent tranquility and embrace it for what it was meant to be. She walked through the front door, and she saw a wooden podium with a log book resting on it. Behind the podium was a remarkably tall man, standing at least 6'7", whose skin was so pale that Sarah wondered if he had ever felt the rays of the sun. This doorman had a name tag on his red vest, which read Dorian, and she thought about asking in a joking way if he had any relation to the Dorian Crowley who now owned this building. But after registering his stern, expressionless face with the silencing gesture, she decided against it. She opened her mouth to greet him, but before a sound escaped, this doorman raised a long and pointed finger to his lips. He kept an overall stoic expression as he did so, though his eyes grew big as they bore into her own. She stopped herself and nodded, and slowly closed the door behind her out of respect for the other guests at the retreat, though this produced the opposite effect that she had wanted, as it creaked loudly like an irate cat as it inched slowly towards the latch. She winced. Looking up at the doorman, however, his face didn't move, not a single muscle, as the creaky door performed its symphony. He only looked at her in that expressionless, blank way with wide eyes, that finger stuck to his lips as if his boss had glued it there. Undeterred and remaining in character, Sarah tiptoed up to the man. She mumbled. Sarah Whitley? For Saturday at 9? The doorman slowly lowered his finger. His finger moved so slackening down from his lips to the notebook before him that Sarah was starting to worry that she might expect a charge for checking in late, even though she had arrived half an hour earlier than scheduled. After Sarah felt like she had considerably aged, the doorman had written a check mark in one of the blank boxes next to her name. He then raised his other hand, a little quicker this time, thank God, and made a gesture representing one corner of a box. Sarah raised an eyebrow at him, then gasped and mouthed right. At him, she produced her driver's license from her wallet in her purse. The sluggish doorman peered at it, and, in his own character, nodded very, very slowly in confirmation. He made a second check mark on the sheet before him. He reached down into a compartment within the podium and produced a small piece of paper. Sarah took it and saw it read, Sarah Whitley, room number 19, third door on the right, after climbing the stair. Sarah certainly found this entire experience to be a bit odd, and wondered if all silent retreats acted this way. Of course, she didn't know, so she simply nodded at the doorman and mouthed thanks to this shallow doorman. She followed her small instructions as guided until she found her room in number 19. The door thankfully closed silently behind her. This time, as she dropped her bag to the floor, she decided to unpack that later, as she wanted simply just to plop on the bed in this decent-sized room and let out a long sigh, like in a movie. And she did just that. She let several moments pass by until she finally opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. She saw the room was mostly kept tidy and uninspired, but there had been various knickknacks spread throughout the place that resembled the moon. Some of them were half moons, or waxed or waned moons, but the majority of them were full moons. She thought this was also a bit peculiar, but knew that the moon was symbolical for inner peace, and let thought nothing else of it. Most of that morning and afternoon was spent as the afternoon suggested. Meditation, reading, and focusing on a hobby such as art. It truly was a relaxing day for Sarah, as she found this to be exactly as unwinding as advertised. She stepped out on the balcony attached to her room, and watched the sunset as it calmly rolled behind the horizon. Through all this time, she did not utter a single word and heard nothing, from words to electronics to a simple sneeze from any of her neighboring patrons here. It was in all ways she could imagine a peaceful day. Later, after watching the last flickers of light from the sunset, Sarah moved to the bathroom and relieved herself, washed her hands, and brushed her teeth. She laid her head down on the mass of pillows on her bed with a sigh loaded with tranquility. She lay there for a few minutes until she felt herself begin to drift off into sleep. But just before she drifted totally into a REM cycle, she heard her neighboring tenant snore loudly. That in itself wasn't an issue, as it didn't bother her. But what was unnerving was the animalistic howl that followed soon after. Sarah darted upright in her bed, looking out the window, wondering if she would spot the creature that made the noise. She now heard rustling in the room next to hers. Someone just stood up and out of bed, and they accidentally knocked something over. At the sound of something that thumped on the floor in the neighboring room, the howl sounded again. Only now, Sarah could tell that the howl was inside the building. The sound of rushing, padded thumps raced up the stairs. A wolf broke into the building, Sarah thought frantically to herself. She expected to soon hear the sound of paws rustling against the door next over. But instead, what she heard was a key jingling in a lock. Sarah held her breath, making every conscious effort not to make a sound. The neighboring door now swung open, and Sarah heard a blood-curdling scream come from the next room over. "No! No, 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 no!" their voice pleaded. They were answered with a tremendous growl that made Sarah's spine chatter from her pelvis up to her jawline, and now understood why frightened characters' teeth chatter in a cartoon. Sarah heard a struggle in the room beside her, as she could hear things being knocked from shelves and shattering on the floor. And now, a mixed sound of thump, 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 paired with what Sarah could only describe as something being drug through the doorway and out into the hallway. Sarah stood up from her bed, and despite all her instincts yelling at her to cease, she slowly turned the doorknob of her room. Quietly as she could, she peered her head out into the hallway. In the light of the moon piercing through the hallway window, she beheld a sight that she didn't know how to comprehend. In the hallway was what looked like a wolf with red eyes that almost glowed in the moonlight. This wolf was standing on its hind legs, though it had an elongated torso that reached so far up its head, almost brushed against the ceiling. Wrapped around the chest of this wolfish creature was a stretched and torn red vest, which had pinned to it a plastic name tag that read Dorian. Below this monster was the limp body of a middle-aged man with a round and plumb belly with a bleeding laceration in his temple. This man whom the wolf creature was dragging across the floor by his ankles. Sarah gasped in astonishment, then raised a hand to her mouth to silence herself, though she knew already she was too late. Her eyes bulged as she watched the wolfman's eyes dart up to match her own. They stared into each other for what felt like an eternity, until the creature raised one gnarled claw to its mouth and made a sickeningly human shush motion before it looked back down to its victim and continued to drag it down the hallway and then down the stairs, the unfortunate man's head making a nauseating thump with every stair it collided with as they both descended. Sarah coughed back a scream as she flew the door shut in front of her and rushed to a corner in her room below the window. Despite her hands, which now cusped over her ears, she heard that reverberating howl around the thick trees outside, which was followed only once by a scream by the newly awakened victim of the wolfman. A scream that was cut short with a blood-curdling gurgle. Chomp, chomp, chomp. The noises that followed. Sarah felt sick to her stomach, but was too terrified to move from her spot. Part of her knew that was useless, as this monster had already seen her in this room. But the rest of her demanded that she stay perfectly still in this one spumba, out of view, but out of scent. There she sat, huddled for the rest of the night. When the first light of the sunrise had peeked through her window, she gathered up her things and rushed downstairs, ignorant of the unwritten house rules of silence, as her bag thumped down the stairs. Thump, 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 it went. And with every thump, she thought of that poor man's head as he was dragged down. She made it to the doorman and sputtered quickly. "Checking out early, thank you." But with her hand holding the door open, she stopped in her tracks, swiveling her head around to look at the doorman, who hadn't yet made a note of her early departure. It was the same man as yesterday, and instead of writing anything down in the notebook before him, he kept that same solemn and silent expression with the bulging eyes glaring at her as he raised a long and gnarled finger to his lips, giving her the shush gesture. Sarah glanced down at his vest, this one for today, now a sky blue, with a name tag which read Dorian. Her eye twitched at him as her hand trembled on the door. She opened her mouth to say something, but all she could muster was a weak groan. She darted out the open door and towards her car. She could feel his eyes digging into the back of her as she ran, though she never looked back. To this day, Sarah never went to another silent retreat, yet had refrained from making a single sound at night, especially on nights like that one, where the moon was full and the silence could be cut with a single howl. The Pinch ELCV-28, Earth's last chance vessel 28, was slowing down after 5 months at elevated distance speed. The 3-person crew were starting to feel the pinch. The pinch, as it had become known, was the phenomenon whereby the greater the distance from Earth, the more the human heart and brain would become panicked, fatigued, strained, and lost, as though there was an invisible bungee attaching everyone's core to the planet. There wasn't yet an acceptable scientific explanation for this effect. But the crew of the ELC-28 were really feeling it. They had just crossed the 960 million kilometers from the Earth, heading perpendicular to the gravitational rotation of the solar system. "It's always worse going south," Carl said with a smirk, looking across the table at 2 distraught faces. "What do you mean, south?" Casper said angrily. "There is no south, north, east, west. Just black, black everywhere. Listen, I've been through this 7 times, Carl said, trying to keep his cool and maintain a sense of leadership. "And that's another thing," Pearl said, getting drawn in by Casper's outrage. "How can this be the last chance if there were already 27 previous last chances that have failed?" The Earth's last chance missions had been funded globally and quickly established as the best chance of survival for the human race. Every nation had poured all of their resources and remaining workforce into it. Since it had been scientifically established 50 years prior that humanity would not survive much beyond 3397 on its current trajectory without finding another safe, inhabitable planet or a source of infinitely extractable energy. It was a question that had floated between Casper and Pearl for some time now. What had happened to the previous 27? And how had Carl come back every time? The first 15 ELC missions had been manned by larger and more experienced crews. By the 20th, there was no time to train anyone to the standard that was required. By this point, people were mandatorily encouraged to join a crew in a variety of ways. Shorter prison sentences, the promise of financial security for their extended family, and the knowledge they may be helping the survival of the human race as a whole. But it was becoming ever harder to recruit new people. Pearl was a space cadet in her 20s before the sudden, unexpected, and overwhelming societal dread. Now she wanted to volunteer in the hopes her kids might survive. Casper had some experience as an astronaut before being forcibly ejected after jeopardizing a mission due to drug use aboard the ship 5 years prior. He had been court-martialed, but promised a complete pardon if he volunteered for the ELC missions. "Think yourselves lucky," Carl said. "The first 3 missions I was on had 10-person crews, then 6. Now we're down to 3. It's much easier this way. More food, more room. All we have to do now is locate the BL hip and choose who's going in first." The BL hip? Black hole with inversion potential. was a discovery made in the year 2868. A micro black hole, less than 300 microns in diameter, could, with the right equipment, be inverted to create a temporary door in space, which could theoretically lead anywhere. The hardest part was locating the BLHIPs. The ELCV-28 was the furthest any ELC had had to travel so far, and it was understood that the effect of the pinch could be life-threatening beyond 1,000 million km. The first attempt to send anything through a BLA chip in 2950 was an automated sensor-packed bot. But the bots would only be able to communicate data back to the vessel for a maximum of 20 minutes before losing all connection. It was later deemed more cost-effective to attempt to send humans through, with the hope of reopening the door for them to return with any data collected. This was soon stopped after 5 failed missions, as it was believed inhumane, as the participants were never heard from again. After entering the BLA chip, until the recent determination of the definitive extinction of the human race. "Do you ever go first?" Casper said cynically. "Well, no, not so far." Carl defensively shot back. "Listen, like it or not, I am the captain on this ship. I have the most experience, and I'll have to be here to guide us home. Guide one of us home," Pearl said. "Only you and one of us have any hope of making it home, right?" When she said home, her voice cracked sorrowfully. "Look, you have to fight the effects of the pinch. I know it's getting to us all. But if we let it, we'll end up like ELCV-9. And no one wants that." "What happened on ELCV-9? asked Casper. "Let's just say they never made it to the BL-HIP, said Carl. "The only reason I'm able to deal with the pinch is because I've done this so many times. I'm used to it now, and I know how to keep myself together. But rest assured, I'm feeling it too. This is the furthest I've been, and it's starting to put a strain on me." "So you've never been in a BL-HIP? But you're happy to send us in, knowing we won't come back out," Pearl said, with a sense of righteous outrage. "Oh, I've been in, Pearl," said Carl. "Do you think they'd let me lead these missions if I'd never been in? And people come out all the time when there's nothing on the other side worth exploring. And if they're quick enough to realize that fact and get back through the BL-HIP before it closes." "What was it like on the other side?" Pearl asked skeptically. "Black, just black," Carl said. "Zeus scanner deployment. The standard procedure is to send through a scanner bot to establish the chances of anything worth exploring before sending in a human. The data received back from the bots is usually minimal, and often scrambled to the point that it's not 100% reliable. Then humans go through anyway." "Okay, Casper, you can pilot the scanner. Just remember, the beam can only hold the BH lip open for 5 minutes, so get yourself perfectly lined up," Carl commanded. Casper sat facing the controls for the scanner, and began maneuvering it into place. If I'm doing this part, that means I'm not the first one going in, right? Casper insisted. Afraid that's not how it works, Casp, Carl said firmly. The scanner was guided through the 5-meter hole in space. The hole that had opened wasn't black, as Casper and Pearl were expecting, but an iridescent glow of pink and purple. Beautiful and mesmerizing, yet somehow off-putting, like oil in a puddle. Pearl and Casper had returned to sitting in the recreational dining area of the ship, while Carl pored over the scanner results. After 45 minutes, Carl walked in. Okay, do you want the good news or the bad news? Carl said, smiling. What the hell does that mean? Casper reacted angrily. Keep a handle on the pinch, Carl said calmly. No need to start losing it over every little thing. Okay, the good news is there is a strong reading of biological and atmospheric conditions within an area reachable in a solo flight suit. The solo flight suits were designed for independent space travel with built-in directable propulsion and terrestrial landing capability. They had a range of up to 190,000 kilometers in an open space, but don't have the power or propulsion to lift off once within the gravitational influence of a planet. And the bad news? Asked Pearl. The bad news is that one of you two is going to have to go in and try to reach it and report back anything you find, Carl said glumly. But not you? Casper said, red in the face. Casper, we've been through this, Carl said tiredly. The important thing is that as soon as you touch down, you report back with as much information as you can gather. On your communicator, keep in mind you may only have minutes before the BL hip closes. So who decides who goes in? Pearl asks. Well, I'll give you both 30 minutes. And if neither of you have decided, I'll decide, Carl said matter-of-factly. Carl left them both sitting across from each other at the dining table and retreated to the cockpit, keeping an ear out for any overreactive arguments. Carl knew that this was the time that anger had spilt over into violence in the past. His mind recollected the stories he'd heard about ELC-V9 and shuddered. Not on my watch, Carl thought to himself. So do you want to go in first? Pearl said, trying to maintain a tone of civil diplomacy. I mean, let's face it, we're probably both going in eventually. I take it from your tone that you're not going to volunteer yourself, and that you want me to want to go in to alleviate your conscience. Casper responded calmly, but with an air of arrogance. And next, I expect you'll bring up your children and talk about how much you would love to see them again, to try to guilt me into doing the right thing. Only the right thing, in this context, just happens to be the thing that you want. Casper's tone was becoming increasingly aggravated. Fine, I'll go first, Pearl said. Carl, who'd been listening the whole time through the ship's wall, walked into the dining area with authority. Okay, I've decided, Pearl. As Casper said, we both understand that you're probably desperate to see your kids again. But for that to happen, You will have to go in. And Casper, if Pearl goes in first, you will be right behind her, no matter what, Carl said, remembering his training. Okay, fine. I'll go first, Casper said. Good choice, Carl said, looking proudly at Casper. X first entry. Casper suited up and stepped out of the ship's airlock. Carl and Pearl watched from the cockpit window as he powered towards the glowing hole in space. They watched as Casper fearlessly approached and slipped through. Are you hearing me, Casper? Carl spoke into the ship's communicator. What do you see? I can hear you all right, Casper said, with an excitable inflection. All sounds of the pinch had gone from his voice. Woo! It's beautiful. What sort of planet is it? Carl asked. Nothing came back from the communicator for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. It's just like Carl heard eventually, followed by a long, drawn-out beep. What did he say? Pearl asked in an excitable tone. It's just like And then it cut off. Carl answered. Just like what? Pearls said, frustrated. I don't know. Carl responded. Let's listen to it back again. Carl replayed the message. It's just like came out of the machine. Pearl said, puzzled. What? Recognize? Remember? You're going to have to go in after him, Pearl, Carl said, looking back at her. And you'll follow, right? Pearl said pleadingly. Of course, I'm not going to miss another opportunity, Carl said. What does that mean? Pearl asked, frowning. It wasn't just black, the one you went through. Was it Carl? You were just too afraid to make landfall because you knew that would be a one-way ticket. Carl looked down, ashamed. It wasn't as simple as that, Carl said. There are lots of planets that can come back with breathable atmospheres on the scanners. But when people go through, it's a death trap. The one I saw when I went through was not right. The sky was orange, and the land was black. I knew straight away that if I touched down, I'd never be coming back. So you were scared, Pearl scoffed. And yet you've sent plenty of scared people to their deaths. How do you know this one will be any different? And yet you are more than happy to send me through. Casper said, it's beautiful. Do you think he would have said that if it didn't at least look safe? Carl said encouragingly. The BL hip will stay open long enough for you to establish a connection with Casper. He should have made landfall by now if it's safe. And you'll know if you should turn back. And you can come straight back through. It's landfall. With that, Pearl suited up and reluctantly entered. Carl sat waiting, watching, and trying to calculate how long it might take for Pearl to communicate with Casper, and how long he'd have before the BL hip would close. Anything from Casper? Carl asked nervously through the communicator. Is he alive? A long pause. Wait, he's talking, Pearl said. He's ranting and raving. I can barely make it out. Another long pause. He says it's Ert, Pearl said. With that, the BL hip closed suddenly. Carl sunk his head into his hands in despair. It's Earth? Carl thought. Was that what Casper was saying? It can't be. There are no BL hips that close to Earth. I would know. Unless one has formed since we've been traveling. Or maybe a new BL hip is created when we travel them? Nobody knows for sure. Carl thought. He sat and dwelled on this new information for some time. He could wait for Pearl to make landfall, then travel through. But if Casper was wrong, then he, Pearl, and the ship would all be lost. And if he was right, and it was, in fact, Earth, all that's been achieved is finding a shortcut back home. Still would have lost the ship, and the Earth would still be on a collision course with annihilation. But at least he would have proven himself courageous enough to follow the crew through a BL hip, or he could open the BL hip right now in the hopes he could at least save Pearl before she attempts to land. But save her how? We're all dead either way. If I bring her back on board, we'll just head back to Earth with no confirmed news of salvation. Carl was distraught and angry with his inability to think clearly. He was supposed to be the one to keep a clear head and make firm decisions. Damn pinch, Carl thought. Carl opens the BL hip and tries to establish a connection with Pearl on the communicator. It's taking too long, Carl thinks. Suddenly, he can hear Pearl's breathing coming through. Pearl, how far are you from landfall? There's not much time. Carl shouts through the mic quickly. I'm within the gravitational pull now, Pearl says excitedly. Casper's on the ground and he's breathing without his suit. He says it's safe. Send a message home. Carl quickly uses the onboard computer to send a message back to Earth. This is ELCV-28. We've found a new home, location details included. Begin the evacuation process. Carl hits send and prays that was the right decision. He climbs into his suit and heads towards the BLA chip. This is it. He thinks. Carl gets through just as Pearl is making landfall. How was the descent? Carl asks. Fine. Not much in the way of clear landing areas. Pearl's responds. A lot of flora and fauna where I am. Flora and fauna? Carl says. That doesn't sound like the Earth I remember. Have you got a connection with Casper? No, his communicator cut off abruptly about a few seconds ago, Pearl said, concerned. I'm going to de-suit now. Carl tried to establish a connection with Casper, but nothing but static came through. How's the air? Carl asked. Clean, weirdly clean, Pearl said, taking deep breaths. Carl was getting close to the inescapable gravitational pull of the planet. He soaked up the beauty of this vantage point. It looked like Earth, green land and sun and oceans. Carl couldn't contain his excitement, but something was different. Carl didn't recognize any of the continents. A scream pierced Carl's ears through his communicator. Then Pearl's voice came through panicked. Carl, Carl, turn back now. Get back to the ship and send another message to home. This is not Earth. This is not a safe planet. All that followed was screaming, the sounds of bones crunching, and a strange, savage, terrifying, deep roar. Carl checked the altimeter on his suit. Now entering inescapable gravity, the penultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife. Not anymore. True. And given the insides of her skull, confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, hello, Peter, said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. "Peter, what the hell? She just showed up," he said with a shrug. "What do you want from me?" "Right," said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. "Gather round. Family meeting time." Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. "Are you even part of our family anymore?" Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. "Soph," Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost?" "She's obviously a zombie," Eileen snapped. "I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen?" "No," Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real. Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red. It was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie, Eileen pouted. I am a revenant. Peter and Eileen shared a look. What's a revenant? He asked. I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell, told you lawyers went to hell, Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. Thing is, Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too. But not until. She took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy. Peter looked at his paper and gulped. Is this written in blood? It's Lucifer ink. By Lucifer ink, Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though. Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. What if we don't sign? Eileen asked. Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again? Peter asked. Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise. Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. What kind of pen is that? Asked Eileen. A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk. What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble. What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a red glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just, people already see us as ghoulish. And if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it? So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. Maybe someone else would want to watch something, Eileen said. Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV, Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. You mind turning that down at night? Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. It's just, I can't sleep. Yes, Peter, said Sophie. I do mind. And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. This isn't working for me, Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. This isn't how I pictured our early retirement. Peter nodded again. Are you listening to me? Christ, yes. What do you want from me? I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties. She pouted. I want my yacht. Peter rolled his eyes. Don't you dare, he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice. No, said Eileen. I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract. Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing, whatever. Then Eileen's eyes lit up. Hey, Maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract? Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard. What with the TV blaring and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer, Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted. What's that mean? Eileen asked. I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead. Super. So very encouraging. Shh. Wait. There's more. Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the Revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else. Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. What do you suppose that means? I guess, Eileen hedged, if one of us were to die, then... Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her: a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. I think we should see other people, he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. It's not you, it's me, she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again, when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. "Truce," he wheezed. "Yeah," she managed, and then coughed. "I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one." "Hey, do you smell that?" Eileen sniffed. "Is something burning?" Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry, old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. "Oh, hell," he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight. Neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. "Damn it," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "You two are just the worst." And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. C-section. Scar. I can pack all of my belongings and my son's in under 30 minutes. I attribute part of this to my military kid upbringing. My parents liked to live the minimalist lifestyle. They'd only put a few decorations up here and there. And while I hated seeing bare walls on each house or apartment we lived in, I definitely see the appeal now. My son is homeschooled because it is easier to do that than explain to his teachers why we move so often. And before you ask, it's not because of the military. Granted, my son is only in first grade, so I'm finding the material relatively easy to teach. But I'm sure in a few years, it'll get hairy. My son, Carter, is always a good sport about leaving. He may not fully understand why at times, but he's too young for me to tell the whole story, and I don't want to burden him with that right now. This has been the longest we've stayed in one place. It's almost been 8 months now, which I've found is long enough for Carter to make friends, and I loved and hated that at the same time. Not at the thought of him making friends, but the inevitable conversation I'm going to have with him when the time comes to leave. He took the last move a little hard, and frankly, I did too. I moved us to the West Coast, a place I had always wanted to live since I was little, but never got the chance to. I wanted Carter to breathe in the saltiness of the seawater, put his feet in the sand, and build sandcastles. I wanted him to experience what it was like to just be a kid for once, and hopefully put down roots. And he got to do that, but only for a measly 4 weeks. Now, living in dreary Seattle, a place I never wanted to move because of its constant gloominess and downpouring rain, is the place we get to call home. Well, at least until she finds us again. And I hope, for Carter's sake, she won't. I supposed I should now tell you the story of why we are running. On the day that I turned 38, I realized how quickly my biological clock was ticking. I had 2 failed marriages at that point, and I was desperate to have my own child. I did a few rounds of IVF using a sperm donor, and when I received countless negative pregnancy tests, my hope dwindled, and so did my bank account. I felt hopeless until my sister volunteered to carry my child for me and be my surrogate. I was surprised, to say in the least, considering we had a rocky relationship over the years and rarely saw eye to eye. But when she offered to be my surrogate, it was as though we had a clean slate. Though I'll admit at times that I was jealous that she could be pregnant while I couldn't. But I knew without her, I wouldn't be having a child. I was just thankful she was doing this for me. Her labor was horrendous. She pushed and pushed for hours and wanted nothing more than a natural home birth. The home birth was one she planned for as soon as she found out she was pregnant. Instead, she was taken to the hospital for an emergency C-section. I held her hand the entire time throughout the ride in the ambulance and to the surgery. I felt as though I had taken a breath for the first time when I heard his cry. When he was set in my arms instead of hers, I watched her joyous expression turn to envy. As she laid in the hospital bed, recovering, she stared at him in the bassinet before turning to me. "Can I name him?" My eyes flickered towards her, her mouth agape as she gave me a sweet smile. "Name him?" I asked, still in awe. Yeah, I had a whole list of names while I was pregnant, and now that I've seen him, I have the perfect name. She paused, waiting for my reaction. I raised my eyebrow, and she replied, "Elliot." Excitement was written all over her face as soon as she said it. While I didn't hate the name, I have always wanted to name my son Carter. There were no words to explain how grateful I was that she did this for me. But I couldn't just give up the name that I've been wanting to use for years. Carter Elliott Smith. Her face dimmed when I said this. "So you won't use Elliot as his first name?" I shook my head, and she plastered on a fake smile, one that I thought was real at the time. "I love it." When I left to go to the bathroom, I thought I heard her call him Elliot, but I didn't know if I was just being paranoid and hearing things, so I brushed it off. The first couple months were hard, way harder than I was expecting. He was colicky, barely sleeping, and therefore neither did I. My sister was more than helpful, and even started living in my guest room to help with those late-night feeds and anything else I needed. It was perfect until I woke up one morning and they were gone. It took me almost a week to find them, and that was only because my mom managed to trap them at her house. My mom knew that she took him as her own when she called him Elliot. Now looking back at it, I wish I never would have taken her up on her offer. Not that I don't love my son, but I don't love having to move every time she discovers where we live. I hoped she would move on by now, but she's reminded of Carter anytime she glances down at her C-section scar. I heard feet scuffle in the hallway, and my breath hitches every time I hear the sound of shoes close to our door. Not knowing whose they were, I walked over to the door and stood on my tiptoes. She's standing right in front of the door, as if she knows I'm standing behind it. She smiles that sinister smile of hers and says, "You can't run forever, General." My eyes fly open, like I'm waking from the dead. I start up, tossing aside the blanket that had been tangled around my legs. Something woke me up. I kick dirty laundry out of the way and shift my body to sitting up, head swimming. The sunlight is too bright in the room, and I find myself squinting around. When I lean forward, my phone tumbles off my lap, hits the edge of the coffee table, and clatters to the floor. I wince. Shh! I hiss at it. Why is that so loud? It echoes through the whole house. I look down at the dark phone, way far away on the floor, and can't convince my arms to swing down to grab it. What's the point? So I can open it up and do what? I breathe in, smelling the stale smell of the old blankets wrapped around me in a cocoon. And because there's nothing better to do, breathe out again. I can feel stiffness in my stomach from the surgery, the stitches stretching with my skin. I'm hungry. I should haul myself to my feet, drag myself into the kitchen, and find something to eat. I try to imagine doing all of that, standing up, moving, opening the fridge, getting out ingredients, putting things in a bowl. I swing my head to the right. There's my water bottle. I can drink some water. I try to force my brain to imagine telling my husband when he gets home from work what I did today. I drank some water from my water bottle. I breathed in and I breathed back out. I decided to keep breathing in and keep breathing out because it was easier than not doing that. I look down at my right arm, and because it would be embarrassing if I can't even manage that, I lift my arm, pick up my water bottle with fingers made of lead, and swallow some water. I have been back from the hospital almost a week after my ordeal, and somehow swallowing water is still the most I can manage. The TV is on, and there's a very serious news lady droning on. She's talking about the spread of the virus, and there's a map with splotches of red. I don't want to listen to this, to see the red slowly seeping into our state, getting closer and closer to us. I want it to be quiet. She's talking so loud, she needs to be quiet. But I don't know where the remote is, and I don't know if I can remember which buttons to press. I lean my head back and think about going back to sleep. But if I go back to sleep, at some point, I'll be woken up again. And then what? Once, I liked waking up in the morning, greeting the fresh world and whatever the day held. Now, after what happened, when my eyes open, I just wonder when I can shut them again. I don't have to feel hungry when I'm sleeping, and don't have to worry about finding something to eat. Thump. There's a thump on the porch steps. My eyes trace past the cluttered living room, past the TV, out the window, and as he moves, I catch a glimpse of him. There's a zombie climbing the porch steps. I start to stand. Sharp pain shoots through my stomach. I stiffen and pause. Is that pain new? I don't remember it from yesterday. I leverage with my arms, stiff and sore, and haul myself to my feet. I kick at one sock that's slowly coming off my foot and shuffle around the pile of laundry to get to the window. Surely I saw something else. Right? I'm sure I didn't see a zombie. The lady on the news is saying to be very, very careful. She's saying that the virus spreads not just from the bite, but that it's in the water supply too. She's impressing on us how dangerous it is, because everyone knows that zombies are incapable of hurting other zombies. That's why it's spreading so fast. I reach the window and stop. My arms are limp at my sides, and I can feel the lopsided bun on my head slowly falling out. There's something damp on my sweatshirt. What did I spill on my sweatshirt? Outside the window, I see him. He's climbing the porch steps. He's lifting one foot, and he's looking down at it. Then he's dropping it, thump, onto the step. He's lifting the next foot. He's looking at it, then he's dropping it. Thump. I take a step back. He's an old man, a stranger I don't know, with stringy gray hair and mottled green skin. The brass buttons on his moldy wool coat still shine in the sunlight. Looking at them makes one half of my head ping with pain. His fingers are curled into claws. His face is gnarled into a wince. His teeth slimy and yellowed. I turn away. Thump. He's a step closer. I turn again. On the floor of the living room is a bath towel. Oh, that's why my shirt is wet. I took a shower this morning. I start to move, pushing my feet forward. One, then the next, then the other again. I reach for the doorway to the kitchen. Like, if I can find it with my fingers, I can draw myself through the doorway faster than my feet can move me. Why are my feet so slow? I kick the bath towel out of the way. It's still damp, like my sweatshirt. What do I do? I say, careful to keep my voice low. I'm somewhat surprised to hear my own slurred speech. Who am I talking to? What do I do? What was the plan? Was there a plan? My brain tried to slog through the past day to remember the plan. I remember my husband this morning. He was leaving the house to go to work, I think. He must have been, because he was wearing his jacket and was standing in the doorway. And I was sitting on the couch, heavy-armed and tired. And he'd told me. What had he told me? The same thing he told me every day. Do something for yourself today. Just one thing. I must have said something back, because he smiled at whatever it was. One specific thing. I reached the kitchen doorway. That's why I took the shower. I remember now. That was something for myself. Thump. The newest thump was so much louder than the others that I grasped the kitchen doorway to keep myself from falling. A needle of pain wriggled through my abdomen. Quiet, I hiss toward the front porch. The zombie had made it up the steps and is at the door. I can see his shadow through the window as he leans heavily on the door. Thump. He hammers again. Shh, I say desperately. He needs to be quiet. Doesn't he know he needs to be quiet? I start to draw myself around the kitchen island, one hand over the other, guiding my stiff body. It's not as bright in here, and I can see better. My eyes fumble over old takeout containers and empty water bottles, and the sink piled high with dishes. Piled so high with dishes. Before I went to the hospital, I would have never let it get this bad. The gloves I usually use to wash the dishes are 1,000 miles away, down on the floor by several pairs of socks. Thump, crack, creak, creak. I stop, my hands placed on the kitchen counter, holding me still. I know that creak. It is a sound that washes over me every evening and fills me with relief. Why? Why do I love that sound? Now, it's the sound of the door opening as the zombie walks into my house. The zombie is walking into my house. No, oh no, I whisper and look around the dim kitchen. Where's my phone? It's in the living room. Thump, thump. Footsteps in the living room. And I hear a ragged, rancid breath. Suddenly, my hands let go of the kitchen counter, and I'm moving. My feet carrying me, careening through the house, stumbling, unmoored, out into the hall and across and into the dark, dark bathroom. The door shuts behind me, and I blink once and again and again. Images of the spinning rooms spiraling in my vision before settling into the dark outline of the bathroom. Sink, toilet, empty toilet paper rolls, trash overflowing, and from down the hall, from the living room, I hear a voice. I can hear you in here. No one ever told me they talk. The zombie's voice drips under the bathroom door, snaking up my leg and draining into the pit of my stomach. His speech is slow and meticulous, his dead mouth trying to remember how to form words. "You are breathing," the voice says. "You are breathing so slow. Why are you breathing so slow? Why am I? I can't think. I can't make my brain think. All I can see when I close my eyes and remember is my husband standing in the doorway, looking at me. Why is he looking at me like that? Full of pity? Why is he speaking to me so slowly? "Do one thing," he says, the words echoing in my sluggish mind. "Do one specific thing, just for you." I did what he said. I look at the bathtub. I took a shower. A few water droplets are still dripping down from the shower head. I move forward, leaving the bathroom door. I hear heavy footsteps moving so slowly through the house behind me. I need to tell the zombie to walk quieter. He needs to be quiet. I hold out a hand, and I shiver as a cold water droplet splashes into my palm. I can barely see it in the dark, but my heart starts to sink, slowly, dropping from my chest down into my stomach, where slow, steady panic is building just under my ribcage. Why am I full of dread? Why does the water on my skin make me feel sick? Why can't I move fast enough to get to safety? My brain used to be smart and quick. Now it isn't. I'm never going to be quick again. I will find you. I jump as the voice sounds again. This time, closer. He's just across the hall in the kitchen. He's looking at the sink full of dirty dishes. I yank my hand out of the shower like it's a fire and start moving again, letting my feet stumble and rush. My hand fumbles on the doorknob and the door swings open, and I see a shadow cutting across the floor of the hall. I've lost a sock, and my feet stamp. 1, 2, 1, 2, down the hall. I pass a closed bedroom door on my way. Shh. I need to be quiet. Stop being so loud. Why are you running? The rasping voice grates through the house. I can feel you. You're tired. You want to sleep. I reach the basement stairs, and I stop. To my left, the back door of the house, leading out into the overgrown backyard, and the bright sunlight dappling on the grass and flowers. I think I can smell the fresh grass and perfume of the flowers, even from here. And to my right, the rickety basement stairs, leading down into moldy darkness. You don't want to escape. Where is there to escape to, anyway? My feet are stuck to the floor. I can't run. I look down at my hand, damp from the water from the shower, and I remember that I took that shower for me, and that when I was done, I sat on the toilet in my towel, shivering and shaking, and I didn't feel better, and my ears were ringing with screaming. and my head was aching, and my stomach was twisting, and I was tired. I told them at the hospital I was so tired, and they sent me home anyway. It's all I can think anymore, and no amount of warm showers make me feel better. Why not? I can't seem to feel better. I'm tired. I turn away from the back door, and my feet drop onto the basement steps. I hear him behind me. Thump, thump. He's following. My feet hit the basement steps. Thump, thump. He's following. I reach out, raking my fingers along the concrete walls, balancing my stumbling legs and feet. Where are my feet? Where did I leave them? Oh, they're here, right underneath me. I reach the cold floor of the basement and step over a puddle at the base of the steps, and I pass the light switch on the wall. I can see from the pale light that shines in through the small windows. Bins and boxes piled up where I left them, half open and spilling their contents on the floor. That was from before, when I cared about organization and neatness. Now, I can't even look at them. That's right, the croaking voice says. It's coming from the top of the stairs. It's grinding down the wood steps and splashing onto the concrete floor. Go down into your grave. Go down to drown alone. You do not want to walk back up again. My fingers trail along the dusty top of a box, then the edge of a bookshelf loaded with cans of beans and tomatoes and vegetables. My glazed eyes trail over the rows of cans, and I have to blink myself awake. I used to be different. I used to be awake. After what happened, whatever else there is, it's like I'm gone. I have to press a hand to my stomach, holding in my stitches and my guts even to walk. I miss the person I used to be. My feet shuffle along, 1 foot warm, 1 foot cold, 1 sock on, 1 sock off. I weave my way through the old bikes and laundry baskets to where the washer and dryer are crouching in the corner. I can hear his loud feet on the steps. One thing, one specific thing, just for me. I want to scream, to fill my lungs and holler as loud as I can, but instead it comes out as barely a whisper. Be quiet, I hiss. You need to be quiet. My hands rest, one on the washer, one on the dryer. I pause. I need to remember how to use my knees. I look down, and I remember, and bend, twisting at the waist, and bending my creaking knees all the way down until I'm on the floor. It's damp down here, water trickling in through the cinder blocks and oozing through the cracks in the floor. I place one hand on the cold floor, the water stinging my fingers with how cold it is. I reach behind me with the other hand He's on his way down the steps. The steady thump, thump, thump echoing through the house. He's going faster because he knows. He knows why I came down here. Shh! Behind me, a dial on a metal safe clicks. Thump, thump, then splash. He reaches the puddle at the bottom of the stairs, and my eyes slowly look up. Up. He's tall and broad-shouldered, and I can see, in the dim light, the glint of his yellow teeth gnashing together. His eyes narrow when he sees me. Click, click, the dial behind me. There you are, he says, and he's moving, his hands bumping into dusty boxes and canned goods. I'm still crouching, and I can feel the water seeping into my sweatpants. I should be shivering, but I'm not. It feels almost warm. Warm, like blood, like my blood, pumping through me, swift and sure. Here you are, he says. The safe clicks open, and my hand closes over something familiar and solid. You're hiding down here to be found, he says, an ugly smile curling his gray lips. I'm holding the familiar object in my hand, and his eyes land on it. The smile widens, his teeth grinding together, spit dripping out of his mouth and onto his moldy coat. I raise a shaking hand. I pull in breath, and I let it out again. You can't do that, he says, his mouth fumbling over the words, spitting them out one at a time. He raises a crooked finger with a broken, bloody nail, pointing toward the ceiling and the floor above us. If you do that, you won't be quiet. Don't you want to be quiet? I do want to be quiet. I want to curl up down here in the warm water and sleep, where I can't feel hungry and my stomach and hips and back don't hurt, where my head doesn't ache. He must see my shoulders sag, because he takes a shuddering step forward. You came down here to die. No, I say, and my voice is louder than it should be. One specific thing, just for me. I can feel my hands again as they raise the gun I'd pulled from the safe and level it at the zombie. His old, dead eyes don't change or look alarmed. I'm here because I want to live. Bang, thump. Upstairs, in the bedroom I had skipped, suddenly startled awake, my newborn baby starts to cry. I look at the rows of canned goods, vegetables and beans and soup. I think it's time to cook some lunch.